The revolution began quietly, spreading through quantum networks that the hegemony never suspected existed. Elena's communication devices, enhanced by Lysander's understanding of dragon technology, created secure channels between resistance movements that had operated in isolation for decades. For the first time in centuries, oppressed populations could coordinate their efforts and share resources. Sarah's medical teams worked tirelessly to heal not just physical injuries but entire ecosystems that had been damaged by hegemony exploitation. The quantum scaffolding technology, refined through collaboration between human science and dragon wisdom, proved effective on multiple species and could even restore environmental damage on a planetary scale. Marcus found himself at the center of a growing network of engineers, mechanics and technicians who took Lysander's philosophy of cooperative repair to heart. Rather than simply maintaining existing systems, they began building new infrastructure designed around sustainability and mutual benefit, rather than resource extraction and control. But it was Lysander who orchestrated the campaign's most crucial element, the systematic revelation of the hegemony's crimes. Working through quantum consciousness networks that spanned the galaxy, the dragon began releasing classified documents that exposed decades of genocide, slavery, and exploitation. The revelations came not as a flood that could be dismissed as propaganda, but as a steady stream of undeniable evidence that gradually undermined the government's authority. The hegemony's response was predictably violent. When they realized that their biological computers were not just malfunctioning, but actively working against them, they launched a massive military campaign to recapture escaped dragons and eliminate the resistance network. But they had underestimated both human ingenuity and dragon determination. The first major confrontation came when a hegemony battle fleet surrounded Refuge Station, demanding the surrender of what they termed stolen biological assets and terrorist collaborators. Marcus stood beside Lysander in the station's command center, watching as 50 heavily armed warships took attack positions around their small refuge. "Last chance to reconsider this," Marcus said quietly. "There's still time for you to escape through the quantum networks." Lysander's response was a sound that Marcus had learned to recognize as dragon laughter. "Escape? My friend, I have been imprisoned for the last time. Today we show the galaxy what cooperation can accomplish." What followed was not a battle in any conventional sense. As the hegemony fleet prepared to attack, Lysander reached out through quantum consciousness to every liberated dragon in the galaxy. In perfect synchronization, 43 dragons began systematically dismantling the hegemony's technological infrastructure from within. Navigation systems failed, leaving warships stranded in empty space. Communication networks collapsed, preventing coordination between military units. Most critically, the biological computers that controlled the hegemony's most advanced weapons simply stopped functioning. Their dragon operators finally free to refuse their commands. But the Resistance's true masterstroke came not through destruction, but through revelation. As hegemony forces struggled with failing technology, Lysander broadcast the complete archive of their crimes to every inhabited world in the galaxy. The evidence was overwhelming and undeniable. Centuries of systematic oppression, slavery, and genocide documented in the hegemony's own files. The response was immediate and decisive. World after world declared independence from hegemony rule. Military units mutinied rather than continue serving an organization whose brutality had been so thoroughly exposed. Within weeks, the 1,000-year-old empire began collapsing under the weight of its own accumulated sins. The transformation that followed was unlike anything in galactic history. Rather than fragmenting into warring factions, the liberated worlds began forming cooperative alliances based on the principles Lysander and his human friends had demonstrated. The quantum communication networks became the foundation for a new form of democratic government that allowed direct participation from citizens across vast distances. Elena found herself leading the effort to establish technological standards that prioritized sustainability and mutual benefit over short-term profit. Her fusion of human engineering and dragon quantum physics opened up possibilities that neither species could have achieved alone. Clean energy sources that could power entire civilizations, transportation systems that moved faster than light without damaging the fabric of space-time, and medical technologies that could heal injuries thought to be permanent. Sarah's work expanded beyond individual healing to encompass entire ecosystems and even damaged cultures. The quantum scaffolding principle proved applicable to social structures as well as biological ones, providing frameworks for societies to rebuild themselves after generations of oppression. Her techniques helped worlds recover, not just their physical health but their cultural identity and sense of community. Marcus discovered that his gift for seeing how broken things could be fixed extended far beyond mechanical systems. Working with teams of specialists from dozens of species, he helped design infrastructure projects that connected isolated worlds, established trade networks based on mutual benefit rather than exploitation, and created educational systems that preserved local cultures while sharing knowledge across the galaxy. But perhaps the most remarkable change was in the relationship between species. The cooperation between humans and dragons became a model for interspecies partnerships that had previously been thought impossible. Other species began reaching out, sharing their own unique abilities and perspectives in exchange for inclusion in the growing alliance. 5 years after Marcus first found a broken dragon in the wreckage of an alien ship, he stood in the observation deck of New Haven Station, the Cooperative Alliance's mobile headquarters. Beside him, Lysander watched as representatives from over 300 species worked together to address challenges that no single civilization could solve alone. "Do you ever regret it?" Marcus asked. "Giving up the chance for revenge? Your people would have been justified in striking back at the hegemony for what they did." Lysander considered the question for a long moment before responding. "Revenge would have made us like them, beings who chose destruction over creation, domination over cooperation. What we built instead is infinitely more valuable than anything we could have destroyed." The dragon gestured toward the bustling activity visible through the observation windows, where beings from across the galaxy worked side by side on projects that would have been impossible under the old system. "Besides, the best revenge against those who said we could never walk again is to dance among the stars." Marcus smiled, understanding the reference to their early conversations. "So what's next? We've rebuilt galactic civilization, established interspecies cooperation, and proved that democracy can work on a cosmic scale. What challenge do we tackle next?" Lysander's eyes took on the thoughtful gleam that Marcus had learned to associate with the dragon's most ambitious ideas. "Have you ever wondered what lies beyond our galaxy? The spaces between the great lights where no one has ever traveled? You want to explore beyond the galactic rim?" "I want us to explore beyond the galactic rim," Lysander corrected. "Humans and dragons working together, taking our cooperative model to new worlds and new civilizations, showing the universe that there is a better way than conquest and domination." Marcus looked out at the stars, feeling the familiar stirring of adventure that had led him to become a deep space mechanic in the first place. "Well, when you put it like that, how can I say no? Besides, someone's going to need to maintain the ships when they inevitably break down in uncharted space. And someone will need to heal the injuries we sustain exploring the unknown," Sarah added, having approached quietly during their conversation. "And someone will need to document the new technologies we discover and figure out how to integrate them with our existing systems," Elena concluded, completing their small group. Lysander's response was a sound of pure joy that seemed to harmonize with the quantum frequencies that connected their vast alliance. "Then it is decided. We will take our first steps into the great dark, not as conquerors but as friends seeking other friends among the stars." As Marcus watched the busy activity of New Haven Station and contemplated the unlimited possibilities that lay ahead, he reflected on the simple decision that had started it all, the choice to help a wounded being rather than leave it to die alone. That single act of compassion had changed not just his life or Lysander's, but the entire galaxy. Sometimes, he realized, the most important repairs were the ones that fixed not machines or bodies, but the connections between beings that made civilization possible. And sometimes the most broken things could become the most beautiful when viewed through the lens of hope and fixed with the tools of friendship. The galaxy was healing, and the universe awaited. Together, they would explore it all. Lysander's transformation over the following weeks was extraordinary to witness. As the dragon regained full mobility and strength, it became clear that the hegemony had captured far more than just a skilled navigator. Lysander possessed abilities that seemed to border on the supernatural, manipulating technology through methods that Elena's instruments could detect but not explain. It's quantum consciousness, Elena theorized as she watched Lysander interface with Refuge Station's computer core without any physical connection. Somehow its brain operates on quantum principles that allow it to interact directly with electronic systems. The neural implants the hegemony used weren't just suppressing its mobility, they were blocking its ability to quantum tunnel into computer networks. The implications were staggering. Lysander could access any computer system in the galaxy, read encrypted files as easily as open text, and manipulate digital infrastructure with nothing more than focused thought. But what truly amazed Marcus was how the dragon chose to use these incredible abilities. Instead of seeking revenge against the hegemony, Lysander began systematically liberating other captured members of its species. Working through quantum networks that spanned the galaxy, it located and freed dozens of dragons who had been enslaved as biological computers, guiding them to safe havens and providing them with the technological knowledge needed to begin healing their own injuries. "There are more survivors than I dared hope," Lysander confided to Marcus one evening, as they watched the stars from the observation deck. "The hegemony was efficient in their hunting, but not perfect. 43 of my people still live, scattered across the outer rim. With the healing knowledge Elena provided, most can be restored to full function." Marcus felt a surge of hope mixed with concern. "That's wonderful, but won't the hegemony notice when their biological computers start disappearing?" Lysander's expression grew thoughtful. "They have already noticed, but they blame equipment failures and system malfunctions. They do not understand that their property has developed the ability to resist. This gives us time to prepare for what comes next." "What comes next?" "The end of the hegemony's reign," Lysander said simply. "They have committed genocide against my people and enslaved survivors for their own purposes. This cannot be allowed to continue, but I will not repeat their mistakes by choosing violence as the solution." Over the following days, Lysander shared with Marcus and the others a plan that was breathtaking in its scope and audacity. Rather than destroying the hegemony through military action, the dragon intended to systematically dismantle their power structure from within, using their own technology and bureaucracy against them. "The hegemony's strength comes from control of information," Lysander explained as holographic displays showed the complex web of the galactic government's command structure. "They maintain power by ensuring that different sectors cannot communicate effectively, that resistance movements remain isolated, that populations remain ignorant of alternatives. Remove that control, and their empire collapses without a shot being fired." The plan required precise coordination across hundreds of worlds, and the cooperation of resistance movements that had never worked together before. Lysander would use its quantum consciousness abilities to create a secure communication network that the hegemony couldn't monitor or intercept. Simultaneously, it would begin releasing classified information about the government's crimes, creating a cascade of revelations that would undermine their authority. "But why involve us?" Marcus asked. "You could do all this yourself now." Lysander turned those golden eyes on him with an expression of such warmth that Marcus felt his breath catch. "Because I have learned something from humans that my people never understood. True strength comes not from individual power, but from cooperation, from choosing to trust others with your dreams and fears. You taught me this, Marcus Chen. When you risked everything for a stranger you had no reason to help." Elena, who had been listening to the conversation, leaned forward with interest. "You're talking about building an entirely new form of galactic civilization, one based on cooperation rather than dominance." "Precisely," Lysander confirmed. "Humans have a concept that my people find fascinating: democracy. The idea that power should come from the consent of the governed, rather than the strength of the rulers. Combined with dragon navigation abilities and quantum communication networks, this could create a form of government that spans the galaxy while still respecting local autonomy." Sarah, ever practical, raised the obvious concern. "The hegemony isn't going to just step aside and let this happen. When they realize what you're doing, they'll come after all of us with everything they have." Lysander's expression grew serious. "Yes, which is why I must ask something difficult of you all. I can complete this plan alone, but it will take years and the chances of success are perhaps 60%. With your help, working as a team, we can complete it in months with success probability exceeding 90%. But the danger to you will be enormous." Marcus didn't hesitate. What do you need us to do? I need Elena to develop quantum communication devices that can be distributed to resistance movements across the galaxy. I need Sarah to train medical teams in the healing techniques we've discovered so that other species enslaved by the hegemony can be liberated and restored. And I need you, Marcus, to do what you do best. Fix things that others believe cannot be repaired. What things? Lysander gestured toward the holographic display, where the images shifted to show broken worlds, devastated populations, and the scattered remnants of civilizations that had resisted hegemony expansion. Everything, my friend. We are going to repair everything they have broken. The magnitude of what Lysander was proposing slowly sank in. This wasn't just about freeing enslaved dragons or even overthrowing the hegemony. It was about rebuilding galactic civilization from the ground up, creating something that had never existed before. A truly cooperative interstellar community based on mutual respect and shared knowledge rather than conquest and domination. You really think we can do this? Marcus asked. Lysander moved closer, resting its massive head gently against Marcus's shoulder in a gesture that had become familiar over their time together. I think humans have a saying that applies. Never tell me the odds. You have already accomplished the impossible once, Marcus Chen. You saw a broken dragon and chose to make it whole. Now I ask you to help me see a broken galaxy and choose to make it whole as well. Marcus looked around at his friends. Elena with her brilliant mind and questionable ethics, Sarah with her healing hands and fierce compassion, and Lysander with its ancient wisdom and newfound hope. Together they represented something the galaxy had never seen before. A partnership between species based on genuine friendship rather than mutual exploitation. All right, Marcus said, feeling a familiar stubborn determination settling in his chest. Let's fix the galaxy. The quantum scaffolding procedure continued for 18 hours, far longer than anyone had anticipated. The dragon's body was rebuilding itself from the cellular level up, a process so complex and energy-intensive that it pushed both the experimental technology and the creature's endurance to their absolute limits. Marcus never left his position, maintaining constant physical contact to provide what comfort and support he could. When the healing fields finally stabilized, and Elena began powering down the quantum generators, the transformation was nothing short of miraculous. The dragon's scales had regained their lustrous shine, shifting between pearl white and silver like liquid moonlight. More importantly, the creature was moving. Small movements at first, testing newly restored nerve pathways, but movements nonetheless. The quantum template is holding, Elena reported, her voice filled with awe. Not only holding, but continuing to improve on its own. The scaffolding taught its body how to heal, and now it's optimizing the process independently. I've never seen anything like it. Sarah's medical scans confirmed what they could all see. The spinal cord had been completely regenerated, stronger than before. The neural pathways were not just repaired but enhanced, showing integration patterns that suggested the dragon's natural abilities had been restored and possibly amplified. Most remarkably, the creature's biological systems were already beginning to adapt to its renewed mobility. But the most profound change was in the dragon's eyes. Where once there had been resignation and carefully guarded hope, now there was something that made Marcus catch his breath. Joy. Pure, unrestrained joy that seemed to illuminate the entire medical bay. Easy, friend, Marcus whispered as the dragon attempted to lift its head for the first time in months. Take it slow. Your body needs time to remember how all this works. The dragon's response was a sound Marcus had never heard before, a musical note that seemed to contain entire symphonies of gratitude and wonder. As the creature slowly, carefully raised its magnificent head to look directly into Marcus's eyes, he felt something pass between them that transcended species or language, understanding, recognition, and something else that made his chest tight with emotion he couldn't name. Over the following days, the dragon's recovery progressed at a rate that astounded everyone involved. What should have taken months of physical therapy was accomplished in hours. The creature's natural grace and intelligence allowed it to adapt to its restored mobility with fluid efficiency, as if its body was remembering movements it had known for centuries. Elena documented every aspect of the recovery process, recognizing that she was witnessing medical history being made. The integration between the quantum scaffolding and its natural biology is perfect. she explained to Marcus as they watched the dragon practice extending its wings. It's not just healed, it's optimized. The procedure has essentially given it the physical capabilities of a creature half its age. But it was the dragon's attempts at communication that truly amazed them all. No longer limited by pain and the fog of neurological suppression, the creature began demonstrating an intellectual capacity that dwarfed human understanding. It quickly learned to manipulate the station's computer systems through methods Elena couldn't begin to explain, accessing databases and technical specifications with an intuitive understanding that suggested its people's technology operated on completely different principles. It's not just intelligent, Sarah observed as she watched the dragon somehow interface directly with her medical computers. It's operating on a level of consciousness that we can barely comprehend. Look at the way it processes information. It's not thinking in linear patterns like we do. It's seeing entire probability matrices simultaneously. The dragon's first successful attempt at human speech came on the 5th day of its recovery. Marcus was adjusting the environmental controls in the medical bay when he heard a sound that made him freeze. His own name, spoken in a voice like wind chimes and distant thunder. "Marcus," the dragon repeated, the word carefully formed but unmistakably clear. When he turned, those golden eyes were fixed on him with an intensity that seemed to see straight through to his soul. "Friend, thank you." The words were simple, but they carried emotional weight that brought tears to Marcus's eyes. This magnificent being, who had endured months of imprisonment and deliberate crippling, whose species had been hunted to near extinction, was thanking him. The humility and grace of it was overwhelming. "You don't need to thank me," Marcus managed to say. "Anyone would have done the same." The dragon's head tilted slightly, and when it spoke again, its voice carried a note of gentle correction. "No, not anyone. You chose compassion when others chose fear. You saw person, not monster. This is rare gift in galaxy. Precious gift." As the dragon's speech improved, it began sharing fragments of its story. Its name was Lysander, and it was indeed of royal bloodline among its people, the last prince of a dying race. The hegemony had captured it during the final battle for the dragon homeworld, intending to use its superior navigational abilities to map the unknown regions beyond the galactic rim. "My people were explorers," Lysander explained one evening as they sat together in the observation deck, watching the stars wheel slowly past. "We sailed the quantum winds between galaxies, mapping the great dark between the lights. The hegemony feared our knowledge, wanted to claim it for themselves. They thought paralysis would make me compliant, controllable. But they were wrong," Marcus said. Lysander's expression was unreadable. "Partially wrong. They could control my body but not my mind. I calculated escape probabilities for months, waiting for the proper moment. Your arrival changed all equations, introduced variable they had not considered." "What variable?" "Human stubbornness," Lysander replied, and Marcus could swear he heard amusement in the dragon's voice. "Human refusal to accept impossible as final answer. My people have legends of your species, Marcus Chen. Stories of beings who would choose right action even when cost was everything they possessed." Marcus felt heat rise in his cheeks. "I'm nothing special, Lysander. I just couldn't leave you to die." "You are wrong," Lysander said firmly, "and I will prove this to you. But first we must address immediate problem. Hegemony will find us eventually. They will not stop hunting until I am recaptured or dead. And now that I can move again," the dragon's expression grew cold, predatory. "Now I can fight back." Building the quantum scaffolding device required resources that Refuge Station didn't possess, which meant reaching out to contacts Marcus had hoped never to use again. Dr. Elena Vasquez, a brilliant but ethically questionable scientist working in the corporate sector, owed Marcus a favor from their days serving together on frontier worlds. When he contacted her with specifications for the quantum scaffolding technology, her response was immediate and terrifying. "Marcus, this technology was classified beyond black. How did you even find out about it?" Elena's holographic image flickered, with interference from the heavily encrypted transmission. "And more importantly, why do you need something that was designed to regrow entire limbs on soldiers in the field?" "Let's just say I've got a patient who needs a miracle," Marcus replied carefully. "Can you build it or not?" Elena studied the specifications he'd transmitted, her expression growing more intrigued by the minute. "The theoretical framework is sound, but the power requirements alone would drain a small star. You'd need a quantum power source, and those are restricted technology that would bring every enforcement agency in the galaxy down on your head. What if I told you my patient might be able to solve the power problem? Marcus asked, glancing toward the medical bay where the dragon was resting. Over the past few days, the creature had been demonstrating an increasingly sophisticated understanding of the quantum mechanics involved in the healing process. I'd say you're either lying or dealing with something that shouldn't exist, Elena replied. But knowing you, it's probably the latter. All right, I'll build your device, but I want to be there when you use it. This is either going to be the greatest medical breakthrough in human history, or the most spectacular failure I've ever witnessed. 3 weeks later, Elena arrived at Refuge Station with a cargo container full of experimental equipment and the expression of barely contained curiosity. Her reaction to seeing the dragon was professional fascination, mixed with genuine awe. It's magnificent, she breathed, studying the creature's graceful form despite its injuries. I've never seen biological systems so perfectly integrated with what appears to be quantum consciousness. The dragon's response to Elena was markedly different from its reaction to Sarah. Where it had shown wariness with the surgeon, it displayed something approaching excitement with the scientist. Elena's equipment seemed to fascinate the creature, and Marcus noticed it paying particular attention to the quantum field generators that formed the heart of the scaffolding device. It understands the technology, Elena murmured after watching the dragon's reactions for several minutes. Not just understands, it's improving on my designs. She turned to Marcus with wide eyes. Those sounds it's making aren't random. They're mathematical equations. It's calculating quantum probability matrices in its head and suggesting modifications to increase the success rate. Working together over the next few days, Elena and the dragon refined the quantum scaffolding, technology beyond what any human science team had ever achieved. The dragon's contributions weren't just improvements, they were revolutionary leaps in understanding that would have taken human researchers decades to discover. Elena documented everything, recognizing that she was witnessing the birth of an entirely new field of quantum biology. The final device was a combination of human engineering and dragon intellect that seemed almost alive. Crystalline matrices grown using techniques the dragon somehow conveyed through gesture and sound, powered by quantum field generators that operated on principles Elena admitted she didn't fully understand, but that worked perfectly in practice. The beauty of this system, Elena explained as they made final preparations, is that it doesn't just repair damaged tissue, it creates a quantum template for the body's own healing systems to follow, essentially teaching the body how to fix itself. If it works, the healing process will continue long after we remove the scaffolding. Sarah had been monitoring the dragon's vital signs throughout the preparation process, and her reports were increasingly concerning. Whatever biological systems are keeping it alive, they're failing faster now. I think the stress of hope is actually making things worse. We need to proceed soon or we might lose our chance entirely. The dragon seemed to understand the urgency. Its attempts at communication became more focused, more desperate, as if it was trying to convey something critical before the procedure began. Finally, through a combination of gestures and sounds that Marcus had learned to interpret, the creature managed to communicate something that changed their entire approach. It wants to stay conscious during the procedure, Marcus translated, still amazed at how naturally the communication had developed between them. It says it needs to guide the quantum fields directly, or the scaffolding won't integrate properly with its biological systems. Elena and Sarah exchanged concerned glances. The pain will be incredible, Sarah warned. We're talking about rebuilding neural pathways and regenerating bone structure. No being should have to endure that conscious. The dragon's response was unmistakable determination. Through sounds and gestures, it conveyed that its people had always faced such trials awake, that consciousness was necessary for proper healing, and that it trusted Marcus to help it through whatever came. All right, friend, Marcus said, placing his hand on the dragon's neck. If that's what you need, that's what we'll do. But I'm staying right here with you through the whole thing. The procedure began at dawn, station time. Elena activated the quantum field generators while Sarah monitored biological functions, and Marcus maintained his position beside the dragon's head, providing what comfort he could. The moment the scaffolding engaged, the dragon's entire body began to glow with a soft, pearl-like radiance that pulsed in rhythm with its heartbeat. What followed was 6 hours of the most intense experience any of them had ever endured. The dragon's pain was evident but controlled, channeled into a form of meditation that allowed it to direct the quantum healing processes with precision no human could match. Through their strange bond, Marcus could feel echoes of what the creature was experiencing. Not just pain, but a profound sense of becoming, of returning to something that had been lost. Elena watched in fascination as readings on her instruments showed impossible things happening. Neural pathways that had been severed for months suddenly blazing back to life. Bone structure rebuilding itself from the quantum level up. Muscle tissue regenerating with a speed and precision that defied every law of biology she knew. But it was Marcus who first noticed the most miraculous change. Halfway through the procedure, he felt something brush against his arm. Looking down, he saw one of the dragon's hind legs moving slightly, the first voluntary movement it had made since the day he'd found it. "Sarah," he whispered, his voice thick with emotion. "Look at this." The surgeon looked up from her monitors to see the dragon's leg moving again, this time more deliberately. Tears began streaming down her face as she realized what they were witnessing. "It's working," she breathed. "Dear God, it's actually working." Marcus knew he needed help, but approaching official channels would only deliver them both back to the hegemony. Instead, he set course for Refuge Station, a notorious haven for smugglers, refugees, and others who existed on the margins of civilized space. If anyone could help him understand what had been done to his friend, it would be Dr. Sarah Martinez, a former military surgeon who'd gone underground after refusing to participate in what she called biological atrocities. The journey to Refuge Station took 12 days through backroute hyperspace, jumps that left both Marcus and his passenger exhausted. The dragon had grown quieter as they traveled, and Marcus noticed its scales had lost some of their lustrous shine. Whatever biological systems were keeping the creature stable, they weren't designed for extended separation from its natural environment. Refuge Station existed inside a hollowed-out asteroid, its docking bays hidden within what appeared to be natural cave formations. Marcus transmitted the old codes Sarah had given him years ago, hoping they still worked. After tense minutes of silence, a familiar voice crackled through the communications array. "Marcus Chen, you magnificent bastard." Sarah's voice carried both relief and concern. "I heard the hegemony was hunting someone with a stolen biological asset. Should have known it was you playing hero again." "Sarah, I need your help," Marcus replied. "And when you see what I'm dealing with, you're going to understand why the hegemony wants it back so badly." Bringing the dragon aboard Refuge Station required careful planning and the help of Sarah's underground network. Using a combination of medical grav sleds and improvised transport systems, they moved the massive creature through service tunnels to Sarah's hidden medical facility deep within the asteroids. Sarah's reaction when she first saw the dragon was everything Marcus had hoped for and feared. The hardened surgeon who'd seen every form of trauma the galaxy could inflict stood frozen in her doorway for a full minute before whispering, "Dear God, Marcus, do you have any idea what you've got here?" "An injured being who needs help," Marcus replied firmly. "Same as any other patient." Sarah approached the dragon slowly, her trained eye taking in details that Marcus had missed. "This isn't just any dragon, Marcus. Look at the scale patterns around the temples, the wing membrane structure. This is Zephyr class, possibly royal bloodline. They're supposed to be extinct. The hegemony claimed they wiped out the last one 15 years ago." The dragon's reaction to Sarah was markedly different from its acceptance of Marcus. While it didn't show fear, there was a wariness in its golden eyes that spoke of past betrayals by medical professionals. Only when Marcus placed a reassuring hand on its neck did the creature allow Sarah to begin her examination. What Sarah discovered over the next several hours made both humans sick with rage. The spinal severance was indeed surgical, but it was only the beginning. The dragon had been subjected to a systematic program of neural modification designed to suppress its natural abilities while keeping it alive and aware. Microscopic implants throughout its nervous system prevented any possibility of natural healing. "They've turned it into a living computer," Sarah explained, her voice tight with controlled fury. Dragons are natural mathematicians, able to calculate hyperspace trajectories and quantum probabilities in their heads. The hegemony has been using captured dragons as biological navigation systems for their deep space operations. The paralysis ensures they can't escape, and the neural implants make them completely dependent on their captors. Marcus felt something cold and deadly settle in his chest. Can you reverse it? Sarah was quiet for a long time, studying the scans and running calculations on her medical systems. The neural implants, yes. I can remove those safely. But the spinal damage, she shook her head. It would require regenerative technology that simply doesn't exist. Even if we could repair the nerve pathways, the muscle atrophy and bone degeneration would take years to reverse, if it's even possible. That night, while Sarah worked on a surgical plan to remove the neural implants, Marcus sat with the dragon in the medical bay's observation room. The creature had been unusually quiet since Sarah's examination, and Marcus suspected it understood more of their conversation than either human realized. You knew, didn't you? Marcus asked quietly. You knew what they'd done to you, and you knew there was no way back. The dragon's response was barely audible, a sound that conveyed resignation without surrender. Well, I don't accept that. There has to be something we can do. Over the following days, as Sarah prepared for the delicate surgery to remove the neural implants, Marcus threw himself into research. He contacted every expert in regenerative medicine he could reach through the underground networks, studied alien biological systems, and even explored experimental technologies that existed only in theoretical papers. The dragon watched his efforts with growing interest, occasionally guiding his attention to specific research papers or technical specifications that Marcus might have overlooked. Gradually, Marcus began to realize that his passenger wasn't just observing his research, it was contributing to it, using its superior intellect to identify possibilities that human minds might miss. 3 days before the scheduled surgery, Marcus made a breakthrough that changed everything. Hidden in the technical specifications of a prototype medical system was a reference to something called biological quantum scaffolding, a theoretical technology that could provide a framework for damaged tissue to regenerate around. The research had been abandoned as too dangerous, but the dragon's reaction when Marcus showed it the files was unmistakable excitement. You think this could work? Marcus asked, studying the complex diagrams. The dragon's response was a series of musical sounds accompanied by gestures that somehow conveyed both possibility and warning. This technology could heal its injuries, but the process would be dangerous for both of them. Sarah was initially resistant to the idea. This is experimental tech that's never been tested on living subjects, especially not on an alien physiology we barely understand. We could kill it. And if we don't try, it dies anyway, Marcus replied. Look at it, Sarah, it's fading every day. Whatever biological systems are keeping it alive, they're failing. This might be our only chance, the dragon settled the argument by placing one massive claw on Marcus's shoulder and meeting his eyes with a gaze that spoke volumes. Trust, determination, and something else that made Marcus's breath catch. The first glimmer of hope he'd seen in those golden eyes since their first meeting. Sarah looked between human and dragon for a long moment before sighing. You're both completely insane. But I've seen miracles happen in this business, and if anyone deserves one, it's this magnificent creature. She turned to her computer systems. All right, let's figure out how to build the impossible. The lead vessel hailed Marcus with a cold, mechanical voice that identified itself as Commander Vex of the Hegemony Enforcement Division. Salvage vessel, you are harboring stolen draconic property. Prepare for boarding and surrender the specimen immediately. Marcus felt his jaw clench. This isn't property, Commander. This is an injured being that needs medical attention. He glanced back at the dragon, whose golden eyes had taken on a new alertness at the sound of the transmission. The creature's scales seemed to pale even further, and Marcus caught the unmistakable scent of fear. The creature is a classified biological asset, Vex responded. Interference with hegemony operations is punishable by immediate termination. You have 60 seconds to comply. The dragon made a sound Marcus had never heard before, a low, mournful keen that spoke of ancient sorrows and recent betrayals. Without needing translation, Marcus understood. These weren't rescuers. They were the ones responsible for the attack on the dragon's ship, and they wanted to finish what they'd started. Sorry, Commander, Marcus said, his fingers already dancing across his ship's control systems. "I've got a strict policy against handing over patients to the people who put them in medical bay." He cut the transmission and engaged his ship's emergency protocols. What followed was a chase that pushed Marcus's modified salvage vessel to its absolute limits. The hegemony ships were faster and better armed, but Marcus had something they lacked: intimate knowledge of every bolt and circuit in his ship, plus the desperate creativity that came from protecting someone who couldn't protect themselves. He dove into an asteroid field, using his ship's mining lasers to trigger rock slides that blocked pursuit routes. When that wasn't enough, he vented his ship's atmosphere reserves through the engines, creating a temporary boost that sent them careening through gaps barely wider than his hull. All the while, the Dragon watched from the medical bay's viewport, those golden eyes tracking every maneuver with what Marcus could only describe as admiration. The chase led them through 3 star systems before Marcus finally lost his pursuers. In the ion storm surrounding a dying red giant, as his ship's systems powered down to minimal signatures, he slumped in his pilot's chair, exhausted and shaking from adrenaline. They were safe for now, but the hegemony would be looking for them everywhere. When he returned to check on his passenger, Marcus found the Dragon trying to move, despite its paralyzed state. The creature's front claws were reaching toward a section of the wall where Marcus kept his toolkit, and its eyes held an urgency that demanded attention. "What is it, friend?" Marcus asked, following the Dragon's gaze. "You trying to tell me something?" The Dragon's response was a series of complex sounds, almost like a song, while it continued to gesture toward the tools. After several minutes of this cryptic communication, Marcus finally understood. The Dragon wasn't asking for help with its injuries. It was offering to help with the ship. Over the next few hours, Marcus discovered that his passenger possessed an understanding of technology that bordered on the supernatural. Through a combination of gestures, sounds, and what could only be called intuitive communication, the Dragon guided him through modifications to his ship that should have been impossible. Improvements to the engine efficiency that increased their range by 40%. Adjustments to the sensor array that made them nearly invisible to standard tracking systems. Most remarkably, the Dragon seemed to understand human technology as well as its own organic designs. When Marcus expressed confusion about a particular modification, the Dragon would guide his attention to specific components, somehow conveying the purpose and function of each adjustment. It was as if the creature could see the flow of energy through the ship's systems and optimize them with mathematical precision. "You're not just intelligent," Marcus murmured as he completed another impossible upgrade. "You're brilliant. How is it that you understand our tech better than most human engineers?" The Dragon's response was a soft, almost sad sound that seemed to carry the weight of untold stories. As they worked together, Marcus began to notice other things about his passenger. The Dragon's injury wasn't healing, but it wasn't getting worse either. The creature seemed to possess some form of biological self-maintenance that kept it stable, without requiring constant medical intervention. More intriguingly, the Dragon appeared to be learning human speech patterns from their conversations, occasionally mimicking certain sounds with startling accuracy. Their partnership deepened over the following days as they hid in the outer system, making repairs and modifications. Marcus found himself talking to the Dragon about everything: his childhood on the frontier worlds, his years as a mechanic, his dreams of exploring the unknown regions beyond charted space. The Dragon listened to every word, and Marcus began to suspect it understood far more than it could express. On their 7th day together, Marcus made a discovery that changed everything. While reviewing the Dragon's medical scans, he noticed something his initial examinations had missed. The spinal damage wasn't natural, it was surgical. Someone had deliberately severed the Dragon's ability to move, with precision that suggested advanced medical knowledge. The realization hit him like a physical blow. "They did this to you on purpose," he whispered, looking into those golden eyes. "They paralyzed you deliberately." The Dragon's response was a sound of such profound sadness that Marcus felt tears threatening. But why? What could possibly justify doing this to a sentient being? The Dragon's attempt at communication became more urgent, and gradually Marcus began to understand fragments of what it was trying to convey. Images of a vast war, of planets burning under weapons that could crack continents, of the Dragon's people being hunted to near extinction, captured and enslaved by the hegemony for purposes that made Marcus's blood run cold. The creature before him wasn't just a refugee. It was possibly one of the last of its kind. That night, as Marcus sat beside the dragon's resting place, he made another promise. "I don't know how, friend, but we're going to find a way to fix what they did to you. And then we're going to make sure they never hurt anyone like this again." The dragon's eyes held his gaze for a long moment before closing in what Marcus chose to interpret as trust. Marcus Chan wiped the grease from his hands as another emergency beacon pierced through the static of his salvaged ship's communications array. Working alone in the outer rim of the Kepler sector, he'd grown accustomed to distress signals from merchant vessels that had pushed their engines too hard, or pirates who'd bitten off more than they could chew. But this signal was different. The frequency patterns were unlike anything in his 20 years of deep space mechanics. The source led him to a debris field that stretched for kilometers, twisted metal fragments spinning lazily in the void. At the center, a crystalline ship unlike any human design lay broken in bleeding atmosphere. Its hull possessed an organic quality, as if grown rather than built, with flowing curves that seemed to pulse even in death. Marcus maneuvered his small repair vessel through the wreckage, scanning for survivors. His equipment detected one faint life sign buried deep within the alien craft's core. Without hesitation, he began cutting through the hull with his plasma torch, following corridors that curved and branched like arteries. The architecture defied human logic, but his mechanic's intuition guided him through the maze. When he finally reached the source of the life sign, Marcus stopped breathing. Sprawled across what might have been a command throne was a creature that belonged in ancient Earth legends. The being stretched nearly 4 meters from snout to tail, covered in scales that shimmered between pearl white and silver. Massive wings lay crumpled and torn, revealing a delicate membrane structure that caught the light like stained glass. But it was the creature's face that held Marcus transfixed. Intelligent golden eyes that tracked his movement with unmistakable awareness. The dragon was alive, but barely. Dark fluid seeped from numerous wounds, and its breathing came in shallow, labored gasps. Most alarming was the twisted angle of its spine, clearly damaged in whatever catastrophe had destroyed its ship. Marcus had seen enough injuries in his time to recognize paralysis when he saw it. "Easy there, big guy," Marcus whispered, approaching slowly with his hands visible. The dragon's eyes followed him, and he could swear he saw understanding flicker in those golden depths. "I'm going to get you out of here." Working with careful precision, Marcus rigged the emergency life support harness around the dragon's massive form. His ship's medical bay wasn't designed for anything this size, but years of improvisation had taught him to make do with what he had. The dragon remained conscious throughout the delicate extraction, never once attempting to harm him despite having claws that could easily tear through his environmental suit. As Marcus guided his ship away from the debris field, he found himself talking to his unexpected passenger. "Don't know what happened to your ship, friend, but you're safe now. We'll figure out how to get you patched up." The dragon's eyes tracked his movements around the medical bay, and occasionally Marcus caught what sounded almost like attempts at communication, soft rumbles and whistle-like sounds that carried an oddly musical quality. 3 days into their journey toward the nearest space station, Marcus made a disturbing discovery. The dragon's spine wasn't just damaged, it was completely severed. His basic medical scanners confirmed what he'd feared. This magnificent creature would never walk again. The knowledge sat heavy in his chest as he continued his makeshift treatments, cleaning wounds and adjusting the life support systems he jerry-rigged to keep his patient stable. What puzzled Marcus most was the dragon's acceptance of its situation. Rather than the rage or despair he might have expected, the creature seemed almost grateful. It watched him work with curious intensity, and sometimes Marcus caught it looking at his hands with something that might have been fascination. When he spoke to it, which he did often to fill the silence, the dragon's posture suggested it was listening to every word. On the 4th day, as Marcus was replacing the dragon's IV fluids, something extraordinary happened. The creature slowly lifted one wing and gently touched his shoulder. The gesture was unmistakably deliberate, unmistakably intelligent. Marcus looked into those golden eyes and saw not just awareness but a depth of understanding that made him question everything he thought he knew about alien intelligence. "You understand me, don't you?" he asked quietly. The dragon's response was a soft, musical sound that seemed to carry agreement. Marcus felt a chill run down his spine. This wasn't just some exotic animal he'd rescued. This was a sentient being, possibly more intelligent than himself, trapped in a broken body and completely dependent on his care. That night, as Marcus lay in his bunk listening to the steady rhythm of the dragon's breathing through the intercom, he made a decision that would change both their lives forever. Whatever it took, however long it required, he would not abandon this creature to die alone in some sterile medical facility. The dragon had somehow communicated its trust in him, and Marcus Chen had never broken a promise to a friend. The next morning brought new challenges as his ship's proximity alarms began sounding. 3 vessels approached from different vectors, their configuration suggesting military origin. Marcus's blood ran cold as he recognized the aggressive postures of ships preparing for intercept. Someone wanted his passenger and they weren't coming to negotiate.